it's fascinating because it seems like any conversation like that where you are talking about the galaxy and you're talking about things that are even beyond what we've been able to get a true concept of yet, like it goes outside of what the traditional Bible teaches, and yet you're having these conversations inside of a Catholic organization. That's
Sure.
certainly fascinating.
Yeah.
The second thing, though, is that you're the general counsel at this point.
Yeah.
So your job is to represent the interests of something that you do believe in, right? Like you're a Jesuit, proud Catholic, the whole bit. So you're part of an organization that you respect and admire and believe in the idea. But you're being presented with something that's so complex and gets right to the meaning of life, like, UFOs or alien existence.
Yeah.
And yet you have to go into the room objectively as an attorney to your clients in this case and say, what do we think? And
Yeah.
the reason I put it that way is because essentially you are going in there, I don't mean to call you a robot or something, but as a lawyer, again, objectively, you have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go with what my guys want to do here. At the same time, though, you're still a human being, and you're still now getting access to things that, or at the precipice of getting access to things that you haven't had access to before that are certainly enough to make you question some stuff. So did the human being side of you ever get in the way of just assuming you were going to do exactly take the stance that they wanted to take?
No. I told them from the very beginning that I wasn't going to do that. I told them that I wasn't there to represent the Catholic Church, and I wasn't there to do anything. What I was there to do is to advise them.
Wow.
That I was, I was trained independently. I had independent judgments about what it is that was necessary to be done. I would share that information with them. I would make proposals to them, and they would either accept them or modify them. And then we would go forward, and we would get some kind of a consensus among our board, who are the assistant provincials, the 10 assistant provincials in the United States for social ministry, and then we would advocate this. So I was always, that was one of the things that disturbed the people in the law firms where I was never obliged to just do whatever their clients wanted us to do.
Wow.
That wasn't the kind of lawyer I was. What I was doing is saying, this is what you should be doing. You shouldn't be racially discriminating against people, in your pricing of your stuff for the A&P Corporation, for example. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be discriminating against people in the, Arkansas, Missouri Power Company, just to increase the rates for black people because you could do it. You shouldn't be doing that. No, they viewed that as kind of unorthodox. Basically, who did I think I was? Who I was is who you came to me to ask me to come to your law firm. That's who I was. I didn't come to you begging to come to work for you. You asked me to come there, and so it's always been that way. And so that when I was at the divinity school, it was the Jesuit order that came there to ask me if I would come and become their counsel, and so that's the role that I played. And so I was constantly, forming independent judgments about what I thought was necessary to do. I would explain to them why I thought this was the right thing to do. And in 99% of the cases, they hadn't thought about it enough. They didn't have anybody in that kind of a position to do that kind of thinking for them.
That's what you were there for.
And so that's what I was there for.
Yeah.
And so when I sat down with Father Davis, I started to explain to him. I said, look, that I've done enough of the studies at the Harvard Divinity School about comparative social ethics, et cetera, to know that the basic worldview that an individual person adheres to is predicated upon the answers that he or she provides, at least unconsciously, to four major pillar fundamental questions. One is the cosmological question as to how the universe came into being. The second one is the so-called teleological question, which is, how is our universe unfolding? Is it expanding and dissolving into nothingness, or is it going to oscillate back and forth in a state of mass and energy? What is the teleological end game for our physical universe? Thirdly, of the four pillar questions is the ontological question: is how does consciousness relate to the material realm? and what is the role of consciousness in kind of forwarding our own biological evolution? Is there any kind of role played in your intention and to evolve your consciousness? And then fourthly, the fundamental one is the epistemological question, and that is, what is it you look to? How is it you go about determining what truth is? Is it predicated on just the exercise of your five physical senses that you can then process through your intellect, or do we have other faculties? Do we have, for example, another faculty by means of which we can directly and potentially immediately, experientially discern the bonding phenomenon that bonds every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the universe together into one unified harmonic whole? And more importantly, do we have an additional faculty over and above that is able to access the infinite and eternal, the exterior to the sum total of mass and energy in our universe? Do we actually have access to the infinite and eternal field of consciousness, not as a separate entity? This is that whole mistake that people make. This is not a noun that we're talking about here. This is a field of infinite and eternal consciousness, and there's no noun to it. It's a verb. It's a non-transitive verb of being, and that's what people get confused about.
What do you mean by that? I'm still confused.
What I'm saying is that one of the major heresies of all religious understandings is to try to nounify what they call God. They've developed this word for it.
Yeah.
It's a noun, and they talk about it like it's a person that you're talking to, like a great white bearded guy sitting on a throne somewhere, right? To nounify this is a heresy. That's why you're never allowed to pronounce the name, right? It's a heresy to announce the name.
To say God?
Yes. Because then you've nounified it, and it's not a noun. That it's a phenomenon. It's a consciousness.
It's bigger than language
that abides. That's right. That it's a misjudgment, a fundamental misjudgment, because you're basically off by one. In that if you don't understand that the field of consciousness is not a noun, but it's a non entity.
But for purposes of what people out there do use in common parlance, in this case, they do use the word God.
Sure.
You are saying that consciousness is effectively where God resides.
That's right. Well, again, you're still nounifying. What it is your location of your consciousness at the nodal point at the core of your being, that you have an unconditioned experience of consciousness. And I say unconditioned by your place of birth, unconditioned by your nationality, unconditioned by your genetic makeup of the physical body that you're incarnated in, unconditioned by your astrological predilections, the tractor forces that you've been exposed to in gestating in your mother's womb, in the time and place of your gestation, those kind of tractor forces like that, for example, suck billions of tons of water off onto one side of the planet every single day. These kind of tractor forces that you're exposed to by the celestial bodies that generates the whole science of astrology, as to why it is that an excellent astrologer, they could sit down with you, and by knowing exactly where the time and place was of your gestation, actually,
right,
it could start telling you what your favorite color is, what your mate looks like, what your favorite political attitudes are. And you sit there and a grown person will cry right in front of them by going, wait a second, somebody's been talking to you. Some of my friends have set this up, I
feel like every chick I talk to these days is doing that.
Well, they'll see right through you on that. And so what I'm saying is that in the incarnated state that our consciousness is in, is that we reside in a vehicle that is conditioned, and therefore our direct experience of reality is conditioned by these predilections that we have in our body. And part of the science of theology is how to rise above that. how you fast, and therefore you're not consuming the foods that affect you. That you don't drink alcohol, you don't do the drugs, you don't do that kind of stuff unless you're really having a good night on Saturday nights. But
I'll take you to Deer Maud later. We'll do it.
You try to refrain from that. And so once you start recognizing that there's this issue about consciousness, and that you can, in fact, direct your own consciousness and start elevating your consciousness into a higher and higher state, that you can then discern things a lot more objectively. Okay, and that from that point of perspective, you can make judgments that are less biased, that are less predisposed toward your ethnic background or something like that, so that's your consciousness, that's your conscience, that's what's there. Okay, and so that there's a science to this whole thing, and when you're in they were quite, I guess, pleasantly surprised that I was aware of all of that when I came to be general counsel for them. And so I started addressing this when we were actually given the opportunity to prepare this 3-hour closed-door seminar for the top SETI scientists, on the theological implications of contact with an extraterrestrial life form. We began to have these discussions. So I laid all of this out to the Jesuit assistant provincials and explained what I thought was the important implication of this, because here we have we come from a star system that's 4.5 billion years old, a planet that's 3.5 or 3.7 billion years old, but the entire universe, the entire universe is 13.78 billion years old.
Right.
So we're looking at other galaxies and other star systems in our own galaxy, that could be 6, 7, 8 billion years older than ours. Yep. So you could have another incarnated species with incarnated consciousness that had another 8 billion years of teleological evolution. And if you assume that there's some kind of like as Teilhard de Chardin, for example, believes that, that there's an unfolding complexification of consciousness, is that we are teleologically evolving over time into a higher and higher state of consciousness. Okay, and we're becoming more and more sensitive. We're becoming much more concerned about life around us, about our environment, etc. And that this is a process that we've become separated. When we evolved the intellect, when we evolved from Australopithecus up to Homo erectus and all the way to Homo sapien and Homo sapiens sapien, that this whole process that we've been going through here has been increasing our ability to get an objective look at reality, and that we can then make conscious decisions how to coordinate our conduct in the physical reality where we are. Just more respectful of the environment, we're more respectful of other life forms, etc. Be less combative. So that these are things that we began talking about in deciding to how we were going to present this lecture to the top 50 scientists at SETI. So we addressed.
And this is in the 70s.
This was 1977, the spring of 1977. Okay. And so that's when I said to Marshall Smith, and I said, look, if you're asking me to deliver this 3-hour seminar to the top 50 scientists at SETI on the theological implications of contact, I'd really like to be able to get at some of the other documentation that we're gathering together for the president, so that I can be better prepared. And she said, well, what would you like to see? And I said, I'd like to see the classified portions of Project Blue Book. And she said, well, I don't think they're going to let us have those, And
How much did you know about Project Blue Book at that time?
I knew a lot about Project Blue Book at that time.
Had you had studied
Oh, yes.
it, I guess?
Yeah. I knew all about Project Blue Book.
For people out there who are unfamiliar and listening, can you just explain what that was?
This was the fourth, actually, of a series of studies that was done by the United States Air Force. This went on from 1952 to 1967. 1969, actually, as it turns out, in that they purported to be investigating the sightings of the UFOs, and that it's been now revealed beyond any dispute whatsoever that it was a total cover-up.
Right.
And that there were over 700 sightings that they were totally unable to explain away. There were just too many credible sources. There were too many radar readings, photographs, etc. So there was an entire section of Project Blue Book that was classified. But the public part of it, they tried to explain away virtually all of the sightings, saying that, oh, this was like searchlights, reflecting off the bottom of clouds, or it was flocks of birds that you misperceived, or it was like a regular airplane of some sort, or it was Venus, or it was swamp gas.
Or a balloon.
Yeah, or a balloon, yeah, right. So they had all these bogus explanations for all this, right? So, and I've been following this very closely because, as I indicated to you yesterday, I was going to go to the Air Force Academy to become an astronaut because I was very interested in trying to figure out how we were going to relate to this extraterrestrial civilization. And I thought that during my lifetime, this was going to come to pass. And so that I was paying a lot of attention to this, trying to figure out how to be prepared to do this. So I'd become very familiar with a lot of all the individual sightings, the contacts, et cetera. So I'd spent a fair amount of time monitoring this whole process as I was doing everything else in the world.
Back then, we didn't have Google, though, and stuff.
No.
So are you just like hitting the library and finding anything you can there?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it?
Yeah.
What's even available? Because there's so much. There's a easier ability to just completely hide things back then because there's not as much mass communication.
That's right. No, it was, you had to want to find it, but there were lots of stuff in, Popular Mechanics and Scientific American, and there was there were lots of magazines that were astronomers, talked with each other about it. There were scientific magazines. So I was fortunate I had access to libraries, and so I would spend time, learning about this. And so I ended up knowing a lot of this stuff. So I sat down and when I told Marcia Smith I would like to have the classified portions of Project Blue Book, she said, "Oh, I'm sure they're not going to let us have that." I said, "Well, you have to ask them." I said, "If you don't ask them, we're never going to get it."
You were asking Congress?
She was Congress. She was the Congressional Research Service in Science Technology. So she would contact the Defense Department as the official representative of Congress, saying, look, we want to know this. We're doing research on this. We want these documents.
Danny Sheehan wants the Blue Book.
So she just said that, that we who have been asked to do the research by President Carter, want to get access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book. And she called me back a couple of weeks later, and she was totally astonished that they'd agreed to do this. And she said, "Yeah, you have to go over to the new Madison building. That it was the new wing of the Library of Congress. They had just completed building.
What was the catch?
There wasn't one, as it turns out.
Really?
They said that I had the right to go over to do it. I had to bring 2 forms of identification. A photo official government identification. So I brought my passport, my DC driver's license, my bar association cards, for both the Southern District of New York and for Washington DC. So I brought those with me, and I went over to the Madison building on this Saturday morning, and went up to the main door, and here are these 2 suits. These guys just both standing there on the opposite sides of the door. Now these are not OSI guys. I mean, I know OSI guys, but they look like it wasn't the Office of Special Investigations of the Air Force. These were SF guys. I mean, these are Special Forces guys, and they were standing there guarding the door. They asked me for my ID. I showed them my ID, and so I went in to the hallway, and there wasn't anybody in the building. It was completely brand new, brand spanking new, not a soul in the building. And so I end up walking down the hallway, down to the elevator, get in the elevator, and I just happened to think I opened up my briefcase and took out a yellow legal pad, and just put it under my arm. And go down to the basement. The door opens. I look down the hallway on the left, and there's a light shining out of the room down there. 2 other suits down there waiting, So I go all the way down there. They say, you got to leave your briefcase here. You can't take any notes. You can't record anything. You can't take any photographs of anything. So I said, okay. So in I go. So
were you worried someone was going to whack you
at
any point? No. You're just fearless going down to this very secretive government hallway.
No. Well, it was the Library of Congress. I mean, it was Madison Building. So I go in, and here are these, there's like 4 cardboard fold-out tables, 2 on one side and 2 on the other side. The room is about maybe 20 feet wide, 15 feet deep, and there are these 4 card tables there, and there was this microfiche machine, this really old-timey kind of tinny microfiche machine.
Yeah, what's a microfiche?
Microfiche is these little canisters that they have, like little film canisters, and they like film strips in them that have got documents. They're photographs of documents and stuff. And so and there were these little shoebox, large shoebox size boxes with a little string tie on them, the little figure 8 string tie thing. And so I went in, sit down, take off my jacket and sit down, lay down the yellow pad over there on the table. And I start to go through the boxes. And I would open up the little tin canister, and I'd take out the film strip, and I'd go over to the microfiche machine, and you'd put it on this little roll-like thing, and you'd crank it. And so I started seeing all these documents. They were all top secret documents. They were all designated like this. And that I was saying, wait a second, this is going to take me forever. They're like there must have been 100 of these boxes. I said, that I'll never get through these things, so I'm looking for photographs. So I looked through the whole first 2, 3 canisters, and it's all just documents after documents after documents. So finally I get to the 3rd or 4th of these boxes, and I open up the canister and put it into the microfiche machine. I'm cranking along, and there are these photos. And I said, bango, here it is.
What did they show?
It was a crash retrieval. It was a UFO crash retrieval.
From when?
Operation. You couldn't tell. But you could tell it had crashed into a field that was covered with snow. So this isn't Roswell, because Roswell was in the desert in July in New Mexico. So it's got a snow-covered field. This UFO has skidded clearly across this field. It's dug up this big trench through the dirt. It's all piled up, in the snow, and it's stuck in the side of this embankment. It's kind of sticking out like a 45-degree angle, stuck in the side of this bank. It's got a dome on the top of it. It's like about 30 feet wide, with a big dome on the top of it, and is stuck in the side of this embankment, right? And there are these people around. They're Air Force people. You could tell that they were in Air Force winter garb, the big furry things around the hood and stuff. And they had cameras. They were taking photographs of this thing. And
did it look like they were wearing at that time like more modern clothing?
No. This the camera. They had a movie camera. One of the guys had a movie camera, and it had these 2 little canisters, these little round canisters, like on the top of it, like it looked like the late 1940s or something like that. One of these little movie cameras. So that was how it looked. It looked like late 40s or early 50s or something, and that there were 2 of these guys that had the still photo cameras that were taking pictures of it. One other guy had a camera, but he wasn't doing anything. And then there was a 4th guy that had the movie camera with the little round canisters on the top of it. And so I could see it. And what I did is I noticed there were at least three photographs of this crash retrieval. And then I noticed in the second photograph, I could see along the bottom of the dome of the spacecraft, I could see these symbols that were along the bottom of the dome. And so I
a pyramid kind of thing?
Well, no, they were this.
Hieroglyphics?
No, they weren't hieroglyphics. They weren't Russian. They weren't Chinese. Something completely unique. And what I did is I looked at it and I said, "Wow!" I said, "Look at this is extraordinary." So I took the microfiche focus and I took out the yellow pad and I opened up the yellow pad to the inside cardboard background, and I slid it in underneath the microfiche machine, and I focused it down so that it was exactly onto the back of the cardboard, and I traced them. I traced the symbols, absolutely identical. It was legal. I'm the lawyer. I made a ruling, unilateral ruling, that I was going to trace them. So I traced them exactly, and they looked like this. Actually.
Yeah, let's see a drawing.
That here's the.
Wait, hold on one sec. Let me just get this ready, and then you go ahead. I'm going to take a video on my phone so we can
So
stick
here's
it in
the.
there.
I'll turn it around you, but so here's the field, you know, and you can see in the field you can see this big trench has been dug, you know, all the way down through the center of the field with the dirt all turned up around it like this. And here's the craft. The craft is like this, and it's like this. This whole classic flying saucer just stuck into the side of this embankment like this, right? And it's skidded all the way across this field, and all along here, right along here, about the bottom of the saucer, you could see these symbols, and they were like this. They were like.
So it didn't really look like anything you'd ever seen.
No, there was nothing. It was I'd never seen anything like this, you know. And they were like this with these little dots and dashes and little like U-shaped things with dots like that. And they were it was all along the bottom here where you could see it. So I traced them absolutely in the exact order, because I said this is going to be really important to have them be absolutely verbatim what there's there and in the exact order that they're in, because sometime we're going to be able to help figure out what this is saying, right? But I knew it was nothing. It wasn't Russian. It wasn't Chinese. It wasn't Hindu or Indian. It wasn't hieroglyphics or anything. And so I copied these down. And then I closed the yellow pad, right, like this, and I put it I put the microfiche back into the little canister, put it back in the box, and tied it back up, put it in there, and got up, put on my jacket, and put the yellow pad back under my arm, you know, like this, you know, and just turned around and walked out.
No one stopped you.
Well, they were totally shocked. I mean, because I'd only been in there like an hour or something, a little over an hour, and I just walked right straight past the guys, you know, and they were both they were both standing with their back to the door, kind of guarding it, right? Not that there was anybody around, but you know that was their job. And so I just walked right on past them, and I leaned down and I picked up my briefcase that was standing there. So I picked it up and just kept on walking down the hall. All of a sudden, one of the guys goes, "Hey, hold it. Sheehan, hold it. What is that you got there?" And I said, "Oh, this is my briefcase. I just picked up my briefcase. It was there." He said, No, what do you got?" And they both come over to me, and they kind of loom in over me. And one of the guys reaches out and he yanks the yellow pad out from under my arm like that. He yanks it like this and opens up and flips through the yellow pages. There's nothing on them, of course, and then hands it back to me like that.
Oh, he didn't look at the cardboard.
No, and it was on the inside of the cardboard, and so he just hands it back to me, and so I just put it back under my arm and picked up my briefcase and just kind of went on down the hall and got down to the elevator and was just hoping I was going to make it out of there, and pushed the button. The elevator came. I went up, went out of the hall. The other two suits were gone.
Do you still have that?
I brought it back to Jesuit headquarters. We put it in the Jesuit files, and then we brought the Jesuit files to California with us later on, and we put them in a big storage place in Riverside. And there was a gigantic, big storm. Those whatever they call them, storms they have in California, that washed out part of the files. We didn't know what had been lost until later on, but we've looked for the yellow pad, and we haven't found it.
Oh my God.
So it was in the Jesuit files that we brought out there to California.
Guys, if you're still watching this video and you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please take 2 seconds and go hit it right now. Thank you. But you remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got the video of you drawing, and we're going to intersplice that in the video while you were explaining it. That's really cool.
And what I can do is see, I don't know that that's the exact order they were in. So what I'll do someday is do the kind of holotropic breathing and trying to get back into a complete relaxed state to know exactly what the order of those things were.
Holotropic breathing?
Yeah, it's a process that Stanislav Grof developed. It's not hypnosis. It's a kind of a super relaxing breathing exercise that you engage in and can remember stuff. That the kind of normal nerve structures of your body get relaxed, and you can remember license plate numbers, and you can remember different things that you wouldn't think that you can remember.
When did you realize you had a photographic memory? Did you know you had that as a young kid?
No, it's just that I would be able to remember things pretty well.
Yeah.
And ended up doing that. I just memorized things, and most of the time I think very visually.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I'm doing anything, I kind of register it all, kind of like a video in my mind. And so that I can remember things pretty well.
I've had a lot of amazing people in here, and I've had a lot of people in here who are light years smarter than I will ever be. But I have a photographic memory myself, and I've never had someone who thinks and looks at things in their mind as they're like translating it here talking like I do until I've talked with you. So it's fascinating to hear you talk because I don't really get exposed to that a ton. But, when you're looking at this down in that basement, obviously it's a great story. It's kind of funny too, but you see a saucer crashed into the ground. I mean, this is still like you've read about this stuff, you believe it exists and whatever, but you now are looking at a picture where you're like, holy shit, that's not ours and that ain't China's.
No, that was for sure. And I knew.
What do you feel when you see that?
Well, it's interesting. It didn't alter how I felt, because I was sure it was true. I mean, I was sure that we had these things, because I knew about Roswell, and I'd read all about Roswell, and I'd read the books about Roswell, so I knew that we had them. And so that, and I was sure that in Project Blue Book that they must have kept records of this stuff, because, the government keeps records. So when I saw it, but I did know that once I saw it and I'd copied the exact symbols down like that I'd better leave. So I just said, I packed it right up and I said, okay, that's it, I got it, and I just walked right out of there, and it turned out to work. And I ended up going back to Jesuit headquarters, right? And even though it was Saturday, Father Bill Davis was there because he knew that I was over looking at these files. So I come back over to the office and I show him what I've got. I said, look what I found. Look, here's exactly what I saw. And he's sitting at his desk and he reaches down and slides open the drawer in his desk, and he hands me this little 8.5 by 11 manila envelope with a little gold clasp on it thing, hands it to me like that. So I unclasp it and I open it and I slide out an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO. And he hands it to me like that. And I said, where did you get this? And he said, I got it from my sister Dorey. And I said, where'd Dorey get it? She said, from Mike. Her husband, Mike, is the chief air traffic controller at the Seattle airport.
Oh, the Jesuits run everything.
And he said that, and I said, well, where did Mike get it? He said, well, Mike's best friend is a commercial pilot that flies freight all around, up around the Northwest. And he took this photograph right out of the window of his plane.
Oh, wow.
And he brings the little camera back to the drugstore back at those times when you had to do it. It's way before you got, and get it developed. And he realized what he had, and he didn't want to get in trouble, the pilot.
Is that when you had to put in the liquid and everything?
Yeah, that was, well, you have to take him to the drugstore. At that time, the only place they ever did, you bring it to the drugstore or the pharmacy section, you give it to them, and then they would send it away to some lab, and then they would get developed, and you come back a week later or something, and they would give you the little. That's how you used to do the photos, right? And so that when he got it back and he realized what he had, he said, look, I don't want to get in any trouble here. I don't want to lose my pilot's license. I'm not going to report this to anybody, but I'm going to take it to my best friend, Mike, because he's the head air traffic controller at the Seattle airport. So he takes it and gives it to Mike. And Mike takes it and looks at it and says, look, I'm not going to get in trouble by reporting this to anybody. And he takes it and gives it to his wife, Dorey. And he says, here, Dorey, take this and give it to your brother. He's a priest. And that's
He'll know what to do with it.
And that's how we got it. And so he'd been sitting there with it in his desk all the time. So that was one of the reasons why he was so open to me, doing all this stuff with this, because he'd sat there with this in his desk. I don't know how long he had it, but the bottom line is he was sure that it was true too. So we then, Father Davis and I went to the Washington Interreligious Staff Council and made a formal proposal to all 54 of the major office directors to set up a task force. to get out ahead of this thing so that we could start figuring out the theological implications of all of this, and we could all start accommodating what's getting ready to happen here. And we proposed that Judy Stone, I remember, was the head of the discussion we were having, and she said, well, are there any other ideas? Anybody else have any other ideas? And they just never even put it for a vote. Never even blinked. Just wouldn't do it. And so it was sometime later that I ended up being contacted by Dr. John Mack, who was the head of the Department of Clinical Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and asked to become his attorney.
Yeah, quickly.
That was later.
I definitely want to talk about John Mack.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very fascinating topic. That was later, though.
Yeah.
So the way I understand what you just said is that within the religious community, whatever you had found to that point died on the vine.
Yeah, nothing.
What about with Jimmy Carter, though, who was the guy who started all this with, hey, let's go to Congress and figure it out?
They sent a report to him. Marcia Smith was very narrow in her interpretation of everything. And what she did was focusing on the Drake equation. I think I mentioned this to you.
Yep.
She kept saying, well, here's the Drake equation. Here's all the different variables. And here are all the ones we don't have answers to, but here's how many stars there are in the galaxy. And, here's what the probabilities are. And she ended up actually preparing a report that said, based upon all the analysis, that it was the judgment of the Science and Technology Division, that the kind of evidence and information that we had that indicated that there was in fact other life in our galaxy, and that there were probably from 2 to 6 at least other highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but non-human species in our galaxy. An extraordinarily conservative reading, I might add, but very amazing, because it was actually the congressional report actually concluded that this was the likelihood.
Gave the thumbs up.
But she said that they were unable to really determine whether any of those civilizations, had developed the kind of technology that would have been able to, go faster than the speed of light. And I remembered I'd interviewed Carl Sagan about this, and Carl kept on saying, well, I'm not denying that that the probabilities are that there's other life there. I said, but of course they can't get here because they can't go faster than the speed of light, so that it doesn't really make that much difference, that we're never going to really be able to have contact with them. That's going to be too far away.
Why was he so certain of that?
Because he was just locked into the Newtonian Cartesian worldview, that the speed of light was an absolute, that as you accelerate a body of matter toward the speed of light, that the mass becomes more and more infinite, and that therefore it would come to a stop, and you couldn't do it. And he was just locked into it, and I kept saying, I don't, I said, you got to try to understand, about the billions of years of other advanced studies that they may have done on this and other star systems. I said, we're knocking on the door of superluminal flight now. And he said, well, I don't think we can really do it. He was like DeGrasse Reed or whatever the guy is this
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, who's the horse's ass, who just keeps on saying these really dumb things, Anyway, so that's how he was. That's how Carl was. But later wrote this book with his wife, Contact. All about the stuff. So he's just sort of let it fly before he died, but
something happened.
But we don't know. He never talked to me about it.
I love Carl Sagan. I love watching his old videos.
Sagan was great. I used to watch every one of the Cosmos stories,
When were you interviewing him?
Oh, I think
70s?
probably with John Mack, probably 1994.
Okay, so way later.
Yeah.
So this report with the Drake equation that Marcia drafts up gets put through Congress and Jimmy Carter.
Sent to Carter.
And did Carter ever come back to you guys again asking for more?
Never. I never heard anything more about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I never heard anything more about it because he got knocked out of there in 1980.
Right.
Because he was only there for that one term, and he was really taken up pretty intensely with the hostage thing for the whole last year.
Yeah. There's an urban legend I know you're familiar with that,
someone briefed him in on it, and he cried.
which I don't think is real, but it's an interesting allegory, if you will, a symbol of the potential of if you and for people who don't know the story, it goes that Jimmy Carter asked about the aliens. Intelligence came in and briefed him, basically said aliens are real. All the world religions are actually just their own experiment to keep us preoccupied while they watch us down here. And, you know, he was a religious guy, obviously, so it was like saying religion wasn't real. And when they were leaving the room, he was sitting there weeping. Now, again, it's like an urban legend, but it's an interesting story to put a symbol on the ontological shock that could happen if things aren't as we have always accepted them on a mass scale to be.
Well, it would be a projection of somebody's worldview who kind of made it up, kind of a rumor saying, well, you know, if my worldview were correct, you know, this is what would happen. And so that's the best you can say about that, because I've never had any confirmation of that. You know, that I've never talked with President Carter about it.
Well, I mean, a guy who comes up in the middle of so many of these conversations he already has today, he did yesterday when we were talking on the last episode, and the whole family did, is H.W. Bush.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the guy's the head of the CIA, as you said, before he was vice president, and you also put it that he was effectively running that. That's interesting. But, like, you know, he also, I know Jesse Michaels pointed this out with you, when he was really old, right before he died, you know, he had an off-mic moment on stage where they had to wheel him off stage after he said, like, if you guys knew what I knew about UFOs, you'd all flip the fuck out or whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, do you think, like, part of his whole mystique is this spy master, you know, keeping control of all the world's secrets and at the middle of all these conspiracies? Do you think UFOs might have actually been, like, the biggest driver there for him?
Not necessarily the biggest driver. It's clearly the most comprehensive secret that he would have known. I'm sure he was briefed in about this. You know, and it's the most thoroughgoing aspect of reality that has been kept secret, so that the geopolitical structures, the economic structures, the religious institutional structures, et cetera, are all crafted from a lower point upward toward this, but don't take into account this at all. You know, so that they're really coming up short. It's hard to even make an analogy to it about it's like, you know, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You know, it's like disregarding a massive piece of information that General Bethune told me a story one time. General Bethune was the first full general in the United States Air Force commissioned. You know, it was the U.S. Army Air Force up until 1947. And then in 1947, they created the actual United States Air Force finally. And he was the first full commissioned general officer. And he was assigned to be the pilot of a plane that was going to be bringing a group of a dozen scientists up to Greenland. Must have been 1948, 49, somewhere around there. And they had spotted some strange aircraft functioning up around Greenland, way up in the northern hemisphere. And he was assigned to be the pilot. There were two teams, a pilot, co-pilot, and navigator, that would spell each other to fly this plane full of these scientists up to Greenland. And they were out over the North Atlantic about 2 o'clock in the morning. They had been refueled already, and they were flying. And the co-pilot looks out of the window and he looks down. And they were over the North Atlantic. He said, "Wait a second. What's that? What are those lights down there? It looks like a little town of some kind." He said, "That can't be true. We're way out of the North Atlantic." They recomputed where their course was, and he said, "No, we're out of it." Just as they realized that they couldn't be over in the little town, all of a sudden these lights just kind of swooshed up in front of them, and it was this gigantic UFO. I said, "This is Bethune is telling me this story, right? There's this huge UFO just right in front of their plane, and he thought they were going to hit it. And so he noses the plane over. It must have been like a B-29 or a B-49 or something. He nosed the plane over immediately and went into this dive and then leveled off and the UFO just backed off and just came back and was still hovering right in front of them like that.
Defying
And,
laws of physics.
and so he turned to the co-pilot and said, "Look, that was a really steep dive I just did, and I need to go back and check on all of our passengers and make sure they're okay." He says, "You take the control." So he gets up and he goes back into the passenger panel. And 11 of the scientists were all glued to the windows, stuck to the side of the thing, looking at this UFO that was sitting off on the port side right over there, and they were all looking at it. And there was this one guy standing in the aisle with his back turned to everybody, just arms folded, standing in the aisle. And General Bethune went over to him and said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he said, "Yes, I'm fine." And Bethune said, "Did you see that out there? You see what's out there?" And the scientist guy turned to him and said, "I'm a scientist. I don't believe in those things. I'm not looking." Bethune told me that story. He said, and that's sort of the way they are. The people are just saying, "Look, I don't want to believe in that. It doesn't fit into my worldview. I'm not looking."
And that's religious. It is.
Well, it's a religion, really, to back up a little bit, the evolution of the intellect in Homo sapien, which we're so proud about, that distinguishes us. The Latin root of the intellect is intellectus, which is the ability to distinguish the difference between. That's what it means. Our ability to distinguish the difference between that we can make linear judgments and make relative judgments of how things are far away and can compute distances, et cetera, mathematically. Religion, the Latin root of religion is relegare, which is to relink. And intellectus is the ability for us to distinguish ourselves separate and apart from everything else in the universe, and that we can then start to compute how our relationship is to everything so we can control it and manipulate it, right? Relegare is to relink us back together so that our consciousness that appears to be separate and apart from everything else can link back in to the unified field of all consciousness in the universe, and so that religion is something much more profound, actually, than just a series of social or cultural beliefs. But the problem is that the latter have come to be substituted for true religion. That what they call it civic religion. That here our country, right or wrong, it's that Christian nationalism. That our country has been endowed by the God of Jacob, Abraham and Jacob, and that we're the preeminent country of the world, and we're destined to all that stuff. That's civil religion, they call that. It's not the same thing as metaphysical consciousness. It's a different thing. It's its own thing, and there's value when you figure that that of course all the Christian churches, of course, began as the Catholic Church. I mean, before the Protestant Reformation.
That's right.
Right, and so that in the Catholic Church, that what they did is they just decided that they were going to keep all this stuff secret. All the capabilities of the human body, the kind of extra capacities that we have to levitate and to potentially bilocate.
When did they decide that? Council of Nicaea?
The Council of Nicaea, for example, struck down reincarnation. That was one of the major decisions they made, is to outlaw belief in reincarnation. But there were a lot of other belief systems that they excluded. And what they were basically telling people is that, look, the capabilities that were displayed by Jesus of Nazareth, and they wouldn't talk about Lao Tzu or the Buddha or any of the other adepts, but they say, but the Jesus, our guy, is able to transpose, water into wine. He's able to levitate. He's able to walk on water. He's able to heal people with his hands. But these are all siddha. I mean, these are fairly well-known siddha in the ancient Eastern traditions. And here's this guy that can do this in Western civilization. And what the Catholic Church has done is said, look, let's be clear. This is the only guy that can do this, right? Okay, he's our guy, and he can do this. You can't do this, okay? We're the church. We're going to intervene between you and the Godhead, and we're going to communicate to you. We're going to tell you what's going on here, okay? But you do what we tell you to do. You be good citizens. You obey Caesar. And there was the Constantinian Compromise that the Catholic Church entered into, and so the Catholic Church became an organ of the state, and that they hid a lot of these secrets about our human family and our capacities that are more exposed in the Eastern traditions, in the Hinduism and Buddhism, etc. Hinduism knows that there's something like 256 different levels of consciousness. There's all kinds of scientific writing about this in the ancient languages. So what they've done is the Catholic Church created a whole set of mythologies that when 99% of all of the people at that time were completely illiterate. I mean, they didn't travel more than 50 miles away from the point where they were born.
They had an ivory tower around information.
Didn't know anything, and so that the scholarship and knowledge and reading and stuff were all confined to the people in the church and the priests in the monasteries, etc. Okay, and so that whole hiding of the capabilities of our human family that have to do with real religion, to relinking ourselves back into unity with the consciousness of the universe. These are all things that need to also be disclosed. And that's what's going to happen here with the disclosure in general, that it's not only going to be the government of the United States is going to have to disclose secret information that's been concealing. The Catholic Church is going to have to reveal this information. And it's going to be quite disruptive over lots of people's beliefs, because they've been given such absolute terms that they have to abide by these rules and regulations. And they're going to see that they're relative rules and regulations. But that this is something that the church is going to have to come to grips with. And that they've issued a formal statement back in November 10th of 2007, where they issued a public statement saying that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, because of the launching of the spaceborne telescopes, we had the Hubble, we had the Kepler, now we got the James Webb telescope. Said, in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, it's now become clear that much sooner than had been previously anticipated, that we're going to be discovering life elsewhere in the universe. Therefore,
than previously anticipated.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what the statement says, issued by Father Jose Gabriel Funes.
Meaning we were already anticipating it.
That's exactly right. And said that, that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, much earlier than we had previously anticipated, we're going to be discovering life elsewhere in the universe. Therefore, the time has arrived for an extraordinarily important conversation about the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. Now, upon the issuance of that statement by Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the director of the Pontifical Observatory at the time, Jesuit priest, I contacted him and flew to see him.
In 07.
And that's right. And I said, look, we need to talk. We need to talk about this now. And he said, look, let's be really clear. He said, we're not talking here about the discovery of some single cell life form under some frozen sea on some distant moon in some far off galaxy. He said, we're talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our own Milky Way galaxy. That's what he said. And so I've known since that time that the time has arrived, for this serious conversation among the laity. And I've been trying to figure out how to get Francis, I stay over at Doma when I'm in Rome, where Francis lives. He doesn't live in the Vatican. He won't live there for safety's sake.
Wait, he doesn't?
No, he does not. He lives in the Doma, which is a separate part.
Can we look that up?
It's on the Vatican grounds, but it's not.
Oh, so it's on the grounds.
It's not in the papal apartments.
Okay. I used to live a quarter mile from the Vatican.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
So, and so that's where he was in the Doma. And so the bottom line is that I've been there. I've talked with Johann X, who's the head of the archives, to try to talk him into letting us see these documents again. They still have not agreed to do that. But the bottom line is the church knows that it has to start mobilizing right away to start preparing people for what's getting ready to come. And that's happening now. There's huge activities going on now. Lots more. They deployed an entire carrier group down off.
A carrier group?
Yeah. The Nimitz carrier group. They deployed it down off the Baja to monitor the site down there. There's an underwater base for sure, right off Guadalupe Island, down underneath the sea.
Can we Google Guadalupe Island so we can see that?
Yeah, there's a specific spot.
You said this has to do with the church?
No, what I'm saying is that there are things happening now. There's such rapid developments that are going on now that they now know that there is this location right off Guadalupe Island between there and Baja.
That island right there on the screen.
Which one is Guadalupe?
Unless we just lost the screen.
Is Guadalupe Island? Yeah, down there's Baja. One of those. It's right there. It's which one is Guadalupe?
The little thing right there. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, that would be it.
Got it.
Okay, so is that Guadalupe Island? Yeah, that's the one. Right off that island, right there, beneath the sea. They deployed the entire the Nimitz carrier.
That's David
group.
Fravers.
Yep.
Right.
And they monitored over 100 sightings of UFOs coming and going down into the ocean right there and going down to the bottom of the ocean. And they were monitored by the submarines. That's right, monitored by the submarines underneath the water coming and going, so that there's virtually certainly a base there. And that there's another base outside of Sedona, Arizona, over by there's a place called Secret Mountain Wilderness over there. That's just totally desolate area. There's a base there where where the craft are, and so there's a number of them high in the mountains and remote areas of the planet, and that they're here now, and that they're extraordinarily distressed. You can tell about the state of affairs right now
of humanity.
On. Yes.
Do you think that some of them possibly could be something else? And to be specific on that, I'm not saying all of them, but that some of them could be some form of advanced 40 to 60 years ahead DARPA weaponry or something like that we aren't aware of, meaning like this one outside Guadalupe, if they're going into the water right there, so close to this island where we have carrier ships and stuff like that, on something like that, more than like, say, a Sedona, Arizona example, I more think something like this at Guadalupe could involve weaponry as opposed to actual alien UFOs, if you will. You think that's possible?
No, if you phrase it that way, is it conceivable? There's a lot of things that are conceivable. But that's not how you really conduct an investigation. What you do is you work from probability projections, and you work out from that. That it's quite clear to me that facility off Guadalupe is in fact a base, an extraterrestrial base. Because the way that the carrier group has been acting, that they dig in and monitor that thing and monitor it under the water and keep track of it and keep records of what's going on, that would not be being done with one of our own weapon systems. But the one in Sedona, on the other hand, there's U.S. military personnel all around that place, and there's helicopters. They're Apache helicopters and others that are disposed, and they accompany the coming and going of these big triangles that fly in and out of there. And that they're witnesses that we've interviewed that say that there are tall whites or tall grays there, along with what they call the mantis people. The mantis people are huge, 7 feet tall, extraordinarily skinny, thin, kind of bowed over people. They remind people of praying mantises. That this particular species,
like Sean Bradley,
No, not that bad. No, that some people refer to these people as insectoids.
Insectoids.
Yeah, it's kind of a pejorative of them, but they remind people of praying mantises, and that whenever they're seen with tall grays or the short grays or the reptilians at all, they seem to be in charge. They're constantly giving telepathic commands of how do they deploy, et cetera. And
When have they been seen?
That they've been seen there in that Sedona base,
Yeah, but
for
when?
example. Let's see here. We're in 2024 now. It was probably 2018 or so,
And who saw
2017. That Melinda Leslie is one of the witnesses who has seen them.
Who's she?
She's a person who's an abductee that was taken into custody by them in a MyLabs operation.
A MyLabs operation.
It was a military operation, masking as an abduction. Stephen Greer has talked about that. It's one of the things that Stephen and I agree upon, that there are such things, that there have been efforts undertaken by United States military personnel to mimic abduction, UFO abductions.
Okay, so this was a mimicked abduction.
That's right.
That she was abducted
That's right.
for.
That's right. And she was taken to that base.
What base?
The base outside of Sedona, the one by the secret mountain wilderness.
That's
area.
not S4.
No. That's in Nevada.
Okay.
That's S4 in the Area 51. S4 is about 11 miles away from Area 51, but they're both in Nevada.
So she's taken to this base by Sedona.
And what they're doing is they were doing experiments trying to discern people's psychic abilities. That there's a major program that's going on in the United States military, because their pilots were unable to fly these things because they're flown by telepathy. The craft are flown by telepathy.
Yeah.
And the pilots, the kind of people that are trained to be pilots, are not telepathically trained. They're extraordinarily linear, very very intense, scientific, logical, positivist type folks, in that they aren't able to communicate with the craft. And so that there's been a whole program to try to recruit people, to try to find out people who are psychic, to see whether they can actually be involved in helping to run these craft, because the craft are run psychically by the ETs. And so unless they have ET people working with them, which it appears they do at the Sedona base, that the ET people are the ones that actually pilot the craft, the large craft. But that they're given U.S. military escorts with F-18s and the major helicopter gunships actually protect them when they're flying some of these.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so she allegedly saw them in 2017, 2018 when she was taken to this base, and they were down there and they were being interrogated.
They were being experimented with. They were asked to do these experiments of psychic experiments.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they were doing, and there's lots of information about that now, about this weird program that they've got going of trying to recruit people that they think are psychic, because their normally trained pilots are not able to fly these things.
It's almost like a Men in Black kind of thing, like when we see in the movie where they have the base and they go in there and all the aliens are chilling and stuff. That's effectively a similar parallel to what's being described.
There's lots of weird science fiction movies all over the place, picking up little pieces of this stuff. That what we do is that I tend not to go to those kind of movies, but because I'm kind of staying focused on.
You're too wired in, Danny.
Right. I'm trying to stay focused on what it is I know. That's why it's easy to remember these things.
Yeah.
Because I don't garble it up with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't read fiction. About these things. I just refuse to do that. I refuse to go to movies that have bad galactic politics, that are that are into bumming people out about making up terrible things about ETs and stuff, like they're here to eat you and all that stuff. You know, you don't want to poison your mind with that. I don't go to vampire movies or werewolf movies or disembowelment movies. I stay away from those kind of
You're
things.
not a Twilight guy?
No. Well, no. So there's lots of information about this now, and there's this extremely interesting phenomenon that has started, as you know, that back in 2017, December 17th of 2017, you have the front page story in the New York Times that Leslie Kean and Blumenthal wrote, exposing the existence of a top secret program inside the Pentagon engaged in professionally investigating the UFO phenomenon. Okay, and they reveal that, and they had some things a little missed in that report.
Like what?
Yeah, like for example, that they thought ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was a lot more formalized than it really was. But Lou goes at some length here. Yeah, isn't
Your
Lou,
client, Lou
and
Elizondo.
Lou Elizondo has written this book. It's his for the last 3 weeks has been the #1 bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. That he goes into detail now about how ATIP kind of evolved out of OSAP, the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program, and how he was doing this kind of informally, and et cetera. But so he's clarified all of that in his book.
We had him in here for episode 237.
Right.
It was a very fascinating conversation. I think we're trying to do another one in November because there was a lot still on the bone there. One of the things that I think, and I want Lou to talk about this in November just so he can kind of once and for all make it clear. But one of the things I think that's confused people in the past with how he's explained it, because again, there was a lot of moving parts here.
Yes.
Is that he's said things like, "Oh, I wasn't a part of OSAP," because it seems like he's making the assumption that OSAP, when he was first being read into this stuff in 07 or 08, OSAP was transferring into what became ATIP. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.